Post-traumatic slave syndrome. Let me speak very directly to this whole notion of what it is and what it isn't and how I arrived at it. As a social scientist, one of the first things that I noticed was just the behavior towards the title, post-traumatic slave syndrome. This is a visceral response in America when you say the slave is attached to anything. Those of you that are more familiar know that what I'm looking at is multi-generational trauma. Multi-generational trauma is not a new phenomenon. We've looked at other groups. We've looked at Aboriginal folks in Australia. We've looked at indigenous natives. We've looked at victims of Holocaust. Why don't we get the pushback there? So you see, this is symptomology. This is speaking to a bigger problem. It's a pathology associated with race in America. Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtue. So we have to tell the truth, and we have to, in turn, tell the children the truth. So the first truth is the majority of the world is a world of color. This is undeniable. So as we look at who we are, I think this becomes very important as a foundation piece. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. And of course, Gandhi is the one who said that. And it's so true, because there's a statement that says, as we arrive at our self-construct, it says that I am not who I think I am, and I am not who you think I am. I am who I think that you think that I am. So it becomes very important to find out what those people believe about who they are, and hence who you are. But this is taken from James Gilligan, who was a psychiatrist who worked 25 years in prisons. And essentially what James Gilligan asserted in his book on violence is that it is the destruction of the culture that destroys the person. That it is as intrinsic as food is to the body, as nourishment for the person, the human, or the psyche. That is what he said after working with hardened murderers and rapists. He said, what we have done in this country is we have deprived them of their sense of who they are. Racism is a system of advantage based on race. And so what becomes important as we look at slavery, again, the second retort in terms of the pushback is, well, Joy, slavery is not a new institution. Lots of people have had slaves. The Romans had slaves, So what's the big deal? Well, American chattel slavery was very, very different from most forms that preceded it. It differed in the way in which a person became enslaved, the length of servitude, the treatment of slaves, and most importantly, the way owners viewed them. Before the European slave trade began, most people who became slaves became so as a result of war. Two societies went to war, winners enslaved the losers. That's not what American chattel slavery was based on. It was based on the notion of Aristotle, the natural slave. And it was believed that black people were somehow less human. So now we're talking about dehumanization and suggesting that never will you rise to the level of those who enslaved you. Whereas in other societies, people became absorbed within that society, eventually married and found freedom. That was never to occur with people of African descent. I often talk about the foundation of our problems around race is based on cognitive dissonance. So the first thing that we have to understand was, how could a people who deem themselves superior, moral, dignified, intelligent, civilized, engage in behaviors that are the antithesis of that? Because what we know about cognitive dissonance is it doesn't settle well inside a person. So then how could a people oppress and subjugate another group of people using the incorrect history that we have for 246 years, with 1619, the date that we were given in the ratification of the 13th Amendment? We're talking about 246 years. How do you reconcile oppressing people for that long? Well, here's the recipe. If ever you are to remove the dissonance, what you must do in order to function, the first thing you must do, number one, is justify your behavior. Number two is that you then have to relabel the people to justify your behavior, to fit the behavior towards it. So the very first fundamental contradiction was the Constitution. The whole notion of democracy and freedom, and at the same time having people enslaved in the absolute genocide of Native people. How do you reconcile that? Be clear that in order for these years of subjugation, centuries of subjugation to occur, you had to have institutions that were complicit. Those of you that know what post-traumatic stress disorder is, post-traumatic stress disorder is a disorder that occurs as a result of a single trauma.